much of Allah's favors can we deny? Above all creatures He chose us to be high. To Him we belong, to Him is our return. Life in this world is only a sojourn. To the angels He commanded that man be respected. Shaitan he did not, and so was he rejected. Compared to the angels, we are but clay. As long as Allah we obey, we'll not go astray.
Assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome to a new edition of Islamic Law. Today we have joining us Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj. Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your support. Well, today we're going to talk about the novelties, the concept of fiqh novelties. Doctor, we're talking about fiqh novelties. Obviously, this is your you've actually studied this in depth, and you've obviously written the book, The Fiqh of Worship. I want to take your insight, Doctor, of the beginning of life. Let's talk about the beginning of life and the novelties of these things. So, for example, if a woman had 4 children, let's say, she went for the 5th scan. This is another novelty, a scan. However, I want to address if they found that the fetus had a defect, for example, let's say Down syndrome. Would it be permissible to abort that baby? Such things like that, Doctor. But please share with us.
Alhamdulillah, Rasulullah. Well, this will be dependent on various issues. One of the issues is when does life begin?
Yes.
And that is usually called personhood in secular terminology.
Mm-hmm.
It is called ensoulment in religious terminology. So when does the soul arrive into the body?
Yes.
In Islam, the soul arrives into the body after 120 days from conception. And that is, the proof in this basically is the agreement of the scholars on this concept. Now, this does not mean that the embryogenesis is only complete by that time, but it means that the body has reached the stage that is suitable for the soul to arrive. When does the soul depart from the body? At death, when the body is not suitable anymore for the soul to reside in it, to stay in it, it departs, and it arrives when the body becomes suitable for the soul to come into it. So this is not at the end of embryogenesis, which happens much earlier than 120 days.
Yes.
Your heart begins forming by 24 days after conception. The embryogenesis is basically complete by 56 days or 56 to 60 days from conception. So you're growing afterwards, but your vital organs have already formed. But by 120 days of conception, you would have reached the stage where the soul may now arrive.
Okay.
So that's why you could have premature babies. For instance, that are as early as nowadays, and in the West, the premature babies could be as early as 21 weeks from conception, or maybe even slightly less than 21 weeks from conception. Because if you calculate it from conception, it's different from how the doctors usually calculate it from the first day of the last period before pregnancy. But if you calculate from conception, then some premature babies could be saved after 21 weeks from conception. But 120 days would be about 4 months. 4 months would be around 17 or 18 weeks. So it is, at least I believe, it is not possible to save a baby born prior to this.
Okay.
Prior to 18 weeks from conception or 17 weeks from conception. We're not there yet.
Okay.
Medicine is not there yet. The earliest would be about 21 weeks from conception. Or 20 weeks from conception.
Yes.
So, and the reason why I think medicine will not be able to save babies that are born before 17 to 18 weeks from conception is that the soul has not been breathed into the body yet. So this is, the new advances in imaging studies and so on had shown us that the embryogenesis, the formation of the embryo or the fetus, is complete in terms of the making of the vital organs by 56 days.
Okay.
From conception. So back to your question, which is would aborting the baby because of Down syndrome, which is another novelty, the prenatal testing.
Yes.
They do various forms of tests that would identify a large number of diseases in the fetus. Sometimes even they can start to treat the fetus in utero. Sometimes they can have heart surgery on a fetus in utero. But the quick answer to this is no. Because Down syndrome is not really incompatible with life as known to us.
Okay.
What is life?
Exactly. Life means for me, Doctor, to be here and serve Allah.
Yeah, it's my turn to ask you questions.
Yes.
I'll take the... No, but it is for me to be here and to save Allah. Yes, life, that's for sure the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to worship Allah. Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created the jinn and ins but to worship me. So our purpose, the purpose of our existence in this worldly life is to worship Allah and to serve Him. But what is life? Is someone in a persistent vegetative state alive? Someone who cannot communicate anything and they cannot understand, see, feel, hear anything. If you can't hear or see or feel, touch, taste anything, and you can't communicate anything, you don't do anything voluntary, and you do not have any input or output. There is nothing. Is this life? It is a very difficult question to answer because many times when the scholars of the past try to define life, they said it is opposite to this or counter to death.
Yes.
But that is defining it by the opposite, and then you get into a cycle. So what is death? It's opposite to life, and what is life is counter to death. So, but some of the definitions of the scholars of the past can sort of enlighten us some more. In one of the definitions in the books of definitions is life is a state. It's a state of being that entails the ability to comprehend and to act, to be willful, and to be capable of comprehension. So basically it has some degree of input and output, some degree of voluntary action, willful action, and some degree of understanding. As I told you, الحياة حالة تقتضي العلم والقدرة يتميز بها الإنسان عن الحيوان. It's a state that distinguishes human beings from others, that entails ilm, which is understanding, and qudra, which is willful action. So if that is life, that could really help us to understand many matters that pertain to the beginning of life and to the end of life. Well, someone who is born with Down syndrome, will he be able to have some degree of understanding and some degree of willful action? Yes, for sure, they do. You know, and some of them are very cute kids, and they live into their 30s, and so how could we ever consider this to be incompatible with life? We can't. Therefore, it is by agreement of the scholars that one may not abort a fetus because of the trisomy 21 or Down syndrome. Now, there are certain other syndromes that would be incompatible with a reasonable life, such as trisomy 13, trisomy 18. So some cases where you're born without a brain, for instance. Or very, very limited, brain tissue or central nervous system tissue, and in this case, you would be vegetable until you die. In these cases, the scholars may say you may go ahead and abort this fetus, because basically their condition, their disease, is incompatible with a reasonable life. But up until when can you do this? Can you abort that fetus? Up until 120 days, because after 120 days, what happens? That is the ensoulment, or basically the breathing of the soul into the baby, and this would make this baby a living being, so you cannot terminate their life. Once they have reached 120 days, you cannot terminate their life. There would be one exception: if the pregnancy would put the mother in danger.
I understand.
That would be the exception. Why? Because she has a stable life. She has relationships. She has other kids, or a husband, and the baby is her child. She is the root, he is the branch. You don't sacrifice the root for the branch. You sacrifice the branch for the root. So if they're mutually exclusive, the continuity of her life and his life, then you save the mother.
Yes, of course. Of course, Doctor. Let me just ask you very quickly, we're talking about novelties. Would it be okay to take a scan to see what sex my baby is? Because this is a new novelty that we're all facing right now. And even myself, when my wife was having the baby, I had to ask, was it okay to scan to see what sex, and if I didn't prefer the certain sex, could I then abort it? Obviously, you've answered that question by saying no. However, would it be okay to take a picture in the womb? Is it compulsory, or is it just just one of those modern day things in life?
The answer to this would be the 5 different categories of rulings. Everything, every human action. Not everything, because things don't have rulings. Human actions have rulings.
Yes.
Like if I ask you, what is the ruling of pigs or pork?
I'd say we can't eat it at all. Keep away from it.
Okay, you're good. Okay, that's a good answer. We can't eat it, but there is no ruling for pork.
Yes.
Because there is no ruling for pigs. Allah is the one who created pigs.
Exactly.
So what is the ruling of pigs? There is no ruling for pigs. There is a ruling for eating pork, and it is impermissible to eat pork. It's haram to eat pork. Now, every human action has one of 5 categories or legal values or categories of rulings. It is either permissible. If the divine, if God does not require you to perform it or to refrain from it, it is up to you, then it is permissible. So if God encourages you to perform it, but does not require it of you, then it is called mustahab or preferable, or If God requires of you to do it, demands of you to do it, obliges you to do it, then it is called obligatory or mandatory. That is wajib. So these are 3 degrees now. We have on the opposite side, God discourages you from it, but does not, prohibit you from it. That is called the disliked, makruh, or detested. And if God completely bans you from it, forbids you from it, it's called haram, prohibited. And then there is another classification in the Hanafi school of fiqh, but basically it will boil down to this. But you have to find one of those 5 legal categories. So you asked me if it is compulsory to do this type of scan. It's an ultrasound usually that identifies the gender of the fetus. And it certainly would not be compulsory, but by consensus it is not compulsory. But is it permissible? Yes, it is permissible. There is no harm in this. And that would not be in conflict with the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْأَرْحَامِ, and that it is only Him who knows what is inside the womb. But because knowing what is inside the womb is not limited to the gender, it is not limited to the sex of the fetus, because we know from before that the angels know what is inside the womb, because Allah sends the angel to breathe the soul, and then the angel asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is it a male or female? And then Allah decrees the matter, and then the angel asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala other questions. So the angel knows. So when Allah says it's only Him that knows what's inside the womb, He knows everything about that being and their destiny, their final destiny, and everything about those beings. So it is permissible. And you should not. People may feel uncomfortable about it because of this verse that it is only Allah who knows what's inside the womb. Now I'm sort of encroaching upon the knowledge of Allah. You cannot encroach upon the knowledge of Allah. So if you get to know the sex of the baby, that is really not what Allah knows. Allah knows a lot more about the baby than this, or that's not all what Allah knows. So it is permissible to identify the sex of the baby. Why do you do this? Do you do this because you want to get rid of the baby if it doesn't suit your preferences? That would be completely impermissible. Utterly haram, impermissible, prohibited.
Of course.
This is a form of infanticide, but sort of inside the womb. So it's utterly impermissible. But there would be, maybe along the same line, someone may ask, in vitro fertilization, for instance, can you select the gender of the baby? Because it depends on the stage. It depends on the stage, and it depends on whether you must sacrifice some of the conceived ova. Like if you have, triplets or something of that, triplets could also survive in the womb altogether with modern, medical technology. But sometimes you have a lot more, and in this case, it would be dangerous for all of them to sort of implant them in the womb. And if you have to decide that you will leave someone out, or some of these conceptuses out, and not implant them in the womb. In this case, selection may be allowed, because you will have to decide to leave some of them and not implant them in the womb. But after they are implanted in the womb, it will be basically a matter a matter of leaving them until they mature. And almost by agreement, it would be permissible to select the gender of the baby prior to conception, versus to try to,
of course,
there is no way that you can. Some people said you eat certain types of food. I mean, if you do this, you're not going to be a sinner.
No.
But will it work? Probably not.
No, it seems to be a myth.
It seems to be a myth. But you're not sinful if you do it.
Of course.
If you eat certain types of food because you wish to have a certain gender.
Yes, I understand, Doctor. It's very clear. Although, let's, ask you a crucial question here. Okay, if we had a woman, and unfortunately she became pregnant, not of her will, if she was raped, let's say, would it be permissible for her to then have an abortion?
Yes, and this is that's a good question. Again, the scholars have actually addressed this issue, particularly when during the time of the war in Bosnia, and when this did actually take place on a large scale. The scholars addressed this issue, and they said that it would be permissible if the fetus is not past the 120-day mark.
Okay. So if it has passed the 120-day mark, the woman must keep the baby?
Yes. Because after ensoulment, this is a living creature now. It's a live human being. In utero, it is someone who has a soul, so terminating their life would not be permissible.
Okay, so it seems very clear. Doctor, I just want to ask you very kindly, what is the ruling of, aborting a dead fetus? If the fetus is dead inside already and you have to deliver, is there rulings on this? Or does the woman have to deliver this naturally, or how does that work?
Those matters are decided by the physicians. Certainly, aborting a dead fetus would be permissible by consensus, particularly if it affects the health of the woman. Once we have ensured that the baby is dead, then and from my medical knowledge, I know that it is important that they proceed with delivering that fetus, because it could cause harm to the woman to leave a dead fetus in her womb.
Okay, Doctor, I know in the past, if someone has committed adultery and do they still have to bring 4 witnesses? And the rulings of today, is this a new, conception to bring 4 witnesses, or is this still the ruling today? Must we still have 4 witnesses if a person is to commit adultery today?
So you're asking if they have to bring 4 witnesses, or they can rely on some scientific, like DNA testing or something?
Exactly. The question would be more clearly, Doctor. Would I have to bring 4 witnesses to say this person has had an affair, or can I rely on DNA testing?
Basically, when someone commits adultery, the 4 witnesses, the condition of having 4 witnesses testify that this person did commit adultery is almost practically unattainable. Almost.
Yes.
But almost practically unattainable. And it was meant to be like this. It was meant to be like this because we're meant to verify this matter or not bring it up at all, verify it completely or not bring it up at all. It was actually meant to be, the punishment for the adulterer and adulteress was meant to be a deterrence, not necessarily a punishment.
Okay.
And I there are so many proofs on this, by the way. If you think about it, is there a punishment for eating pork? There is not.
No.
There is no prescribed punishment for eating pork. Is there a prescribed punishment for usury, like transactions with interest? There is not.
Yes. No.
And which one is a greater sin? Transacting with interest, charging interest, or fornication, adultery?
Adultery, I think. I mean, you please answer me, Doctor.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is certainly charging interest is a greater sin, is a greater crime. So why does it not have a prescribed punishment, whereas adultery has prescribed punishment? The answer to this is that prescribed punishment is not meant to be an act of revenge.
Okay.
Because even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was not a single case where adultery was proven by 4 witnesses.
Okay.
Only confession. So it is to deter people from doing this in public. It is to deter people from being so casual about these things and to do them in public, or to do them in a way that would compromise the morality of the society. But it is not to spy on people in their homes and to try to punish them for doing this particular thing. It's actually a matter of deterrence. So like eating pork, there is no prescribed punishment. Usually there is no prescribed punishment, but here there is prescribed punishment. Why is that? Because the temptation is so huge. And you need to build the fence to protect the people from falling into the temptation. It's actually a protection of the person, because the people who will commit adultery, they will be regretful. They will have sort of a moral conflict. They will be at this comfort, this ease, this this harmony between their conscience and their mind and so on. So it is protection for the society. It is protection for the potential offenders, so that they desist from the crime that is very tempting. So you have a pulling force. So you're erecting this barrier, which is the possibility of a severe punishment. If you indulge in this, the possibility of a severe punishment will keep you away from falling into this temptation. Whereas, like usurious transactions, you can keep yourself. There is not that much temptation.
Exactly.
It is just wickedness of the heart to charge interest. So basically, the 4 witnesses were meant to be a means of sort of limiting the punishment.
Yes.
Making it very, very, very difficult to establish the crime and to punish the offenders, because it was not meant in the first place to be an act of revenge, but rather a means of deterrence. So, yes, the 4 witnesses would still be needed to prove that someone committed adultery. Using DNA testing would not be sufficient to punish people. Even though you could reach the level of certainty or close to certainty that they have committed adultery, particularly if the woman gets pregnant and then the parenthood of that foreign man is established for the child. So it is certain that they've committed adultery, or almost certain. But the issue here is we're not looking for punishing the people or taking revenge. Like I said, it's a matter of deterrence.
I understand, Doctor. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Just catch up on that after the break.
All right.
We're just going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum.
Which of Allah's favors can we deny? Above all creatures, He chose us to be high.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to E-Times. You guys, like we said, we're so happy that you invited us into your home for this lovely day. We want to greet all the Muslims all around the world and all around the universe on this lovely day.
Here we go. Alhamdulillah, we're getting ready. We got to do this now, guys. You're ready. I'm ready.
Read your Quran. Read your Quran. Read your Quran. Just don't let it collect dust. No. Read your Quran. Read your Quran. Read your Quran. It's a guide. It's for all of us.
Well, I'm from the beach in Australia.
Yeah.
So for me in the mountains, it's very hard, brother. But,
Right.
you know, to get back to the beach is awesome for me.
On this lovely day, I promise you a very special guest all the way from Texas. That's right, Sheikh Yusuf Estes. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Yusuf.
Walaikum salam, Malik.
Sheikh, how did your last name rhymes with the state you come from? Estes, Texas. Texas, Estes. How did you manage that?
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
As soon as Ramadan is over, you won't see him again until the next Ramadan.
Sulaiman Omar Waziri is saying, my best experience on Eid is that the culture of spreading salam, hugging each other and showing happiness and mercy to each other, and also inviting people to come and share the little that we have in terms of meals and drinks. That's the main point.
You know, they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the 30 days of Ramadan. Suddenly they come to a sudden stop. That's not nice.
And actually, I feel like if we overindulge sometimes by celebrating Eid for too long.
And how can we offer thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We offer thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing more good deeds after Ramadan. By continuing and doing good deeds after Ramadan. We don't offer thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by returning back to the bad habits.
First time ever to have Eid outside of America.
Wow. It's been my pleasure. It's been a wonderful time spending this time with you. I certainly hope to be here next year with you, and I certainly hope you are here next year as well.
Which of Allah's favors can we deny? Above all creatures, He chose us to be high.
Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome back to Islamic Law. Well, today we have Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj joining us. Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you.
Well, we're discussing the concept of, the beginning of life. We're talking about fiqh. Doctor, we're talking obviously about fiqh, and we're discussing the beginning of life and the concept of DNA testing, abortion, such things like this. Doctor, I know in the West, the Muslim community has many issues. For example, if they are psychologically depressed, they go to a psychologist. Another issue would be if there is illegitimate children in a Muslim community, they have, this is a novelty. How can we address these issues in the West?
Okay, well, just before the break, we were talking about DNA testing, and I said you cannot establish the crime of adultery by DNA testing, but you could establish that someone assaulted a woman by DNA testing. Yes. If a woman claimed that someone assaulted her, then you can refer to DNA testing to sort of find out whether that did take place or not, or at least to find out if there was a contact between the two people or not necessarily the very act of adultery itself. But the issue of illegitimate children and the role of DNA testing in this case, this is a novelty. Not that illegitimate children are a novelty, exactly. But because that's not a novelty.
No.
But does DNA testing help us in this case? That is a novelty. Well, DNA testing can identify the parenthood of the child, the paternity of a certain individual. That's the biological paternity, whether a certain person was the contributor of the sperm to this conceptus, which you need a male to contribute the sperm and a female to contribute the ovum for you to have a fetus and then thereafter a child. So can DNA testing help us identify who the biological father is? Yes, it can, with a great deal of precision, almost 100%, unless there is human error in the lab. But in many laws, it is required that you have more than one lab test the specimen, so that you do not have this issue of human error. Now, what would that mean in Islamic fiqh? If you have like DNA testing proving the parenthood or paternity of a particular person, that he's the father of the fetus. If that woman is married and that person is not her husband, then by consensus, the child will not be attributed to that person, the fornicator, because she is married. The child is attributed to the husband unless the husband disowns the child.
Okay.
Can the husband disown the child based only on DNA testing? No, he can't. He will then have to go through the procedure of li'an or public imprecation to be able to disown that child. Now, so that is the first thing. Now, if that woman was not married and she had an affair, a illegitimate affair, a child is born out of the wedlock, this is not a novelty, but now we can, with precision, identify who the father is. In the past, they used to use like the morphology of the child and the father to try to figure out if that father belongs to the is the father of the child or not. But now we have this tool that Allah had provided us with that can identify who the biological father is with a great deal of certainty. Is it then allowable to attribute that fetus to that father, who is the biological father, but he's not a legitimate partner of that woman? The very vast majority, let's say the vast majority of the scholars said it is not permissible. The child will not be attributed to that father because he was not in a legitimate affair with that woman, or even an affair that would be perceived as legitimate by the two partners. Now, so in this case, they say that no, the child will never be attributed to the father. But there is another group of scholars, such as Al-Hasan, from the followers of the Sahaba, and Naqai, Ibn Sirin, there is Sulaiman ibn Yasar, and Imam Taymiyyah also chose their position. They said that the child could be attributed to the father in this case because the woman was not married to another person. Then it may be allowable. It was reported from Imam Abu Hanifa also that he said that he may marry her while she's pregnant, and sort of as to mend the problematic situation and try to resolve it in the best way possible. And certainly, if he would marry her if she had repented from the act itself of fornication. So, in this case, DNA testing can help us in this regard. The DNA testing also helps us identify in case of mix-ups in the hospitals or mass calamities, disasters where children, newborns, infants are left unidentified, and their parents may have died, to identify where they come from. So DNA testing can help in all of those scenarios.
Yes, of course, Doctor. There's many cases over the years about the mix-up in the hospitals of the babies, and 14 years down the line they find out that this daughter that they've loved and cherished for 14 years is not their daughter, and it's very hard to then swap places. But a crucial point that I want to pick up on, Doctor, is, okay, let's take a married couple, and they have not been blessed with a child. Nowadays, we can artificial inseminate the woman. Would this be permissible for the woman to then go ahead and be artificially inseminated so she would become pregnant?
Well, it depends on where the semen is coming from.
Okay.
Yes, in vitro fertilization, which is when you, in order for conception to take place, you have to have healthy sperm, healthy ovum, and they need to meet inside, the tubes, or so that meeting inside the tubes means that the passage is clear. Sometimes that is not true, or the ovum cannot meet the sperm for some reason to become fertilized by it. And that is when you get the ovum out and the sperm, and you have this meeting between the ovum and the sperm outside of the uterus, they called them test tube babies in the past, but
Yes.
that notion was quite confusing to people, misleading, because people thought that you could actually make babies in test tubes. That's not true. It's just that meeting between the ovum and the sperm that happens outside of the uterus, and then the conceptus gets reimplanted or gets implanted in the uterus, and then the fetus grows in the uterus. So the in vitro fertilization as a concept per se is permissible. It would be permissible if the sperm comes from the husband and the ovum comes from the wife. That would be clear. But that's not always the case.
Of course.
Sometimes the sperm could be donated by someone who's not the husband. And that would be utterly impermissible.
Okay.
Because it is basically getting the sperm of that individual into the uterus of a woman that's foreign to him, and although there has not been a sexual contact, but that to get the sperm of a foreign person inside the uterus of a woman would be utterly impermissible by consensus.
I understand. It's quite clear, Doctor. Okay, so if the woman and the man are married and that the sperm comes from the male that she's married to, fine. If not, it's not permissible. Okay, great. Thanks for answering that, Doctor. Okay, so let me move.
The other scenario would be that if a foreign woman contributed the ovum. Okay. Not a foreign man contributed the sperm.
Yes.
But a foreign woman contributed, like a man and a woman who are married.
Yes.
And the woman, does not have healthy ova, and another woman contributes the ovum, and it gets fertilized by the sperm of that man and implanted into the uterus of the wife. So the contributor of the ovum here is just contributing the ovum, or the wife does not have the ability to bear the child in her womb, so the ovum is from the wife, the sperm is from the man, and then the conceptus gets implanted into a surrogate uterus. All of those scenarios are forbidden.
Yes.
The only scenario that is allowed is when the sperm is contributed by the man, the husband, the ovum is contributed by the wife, and the conceptus is implanted in the womb of the wife.
I see. That was my next question, Doctor. So let me very quickly ask you, okay, if the husband was putting pressure on his wife to abort the baby after 2 months, what's the ruling for this? Because if the man says, okay, we can't afford the baby, we can't do this, and putting pressure on his wife, how can we deal with this issue?
Mutual agreement between them is necessary for any abortion to be permissible. Mutual agreement is necessary for any abortion to be permissible. We said that abortion is not permissible after 120 days for any purpose. Between 40 and 120 days, abortion would only be permissible if there is a disease in the child that is not compatible with, decent life.
Of course.
And as we said, that this does not include someone with Down syndrome. This does not include someone who's going to be born blind, or one limb short, or this or that, something incompatible with life. Okay. So the baby will be a vegetable until he dies or she dies, and this is incompatible with decent life. But before the 40 days, the abortion may be more permissible for less pressing indications. But then it would also be permissible by mutual agreement between the two partners. And in fact, in the Islamic fiqh, it never said that the husband has this, can make this decision by himself. Okay. But in the Hanafi madhab, in some positions without the Hanafi madhab, it actually gave this right to the wife, that she could proceed with this without the husband's permission. But the majority of the scholars are of the position that a mutual agreement is needed, because this conceptus belongs to both of them. Now, the mutual agreement, the agreement of the husband will not be needed in the case where the wife's life is in danger,
okay.
Then whether the husband agrees or not, we will save the wife's life
Exactly.
regardless of the agreement of the husband. But if that is not the case, and in the issue pertains to, sort of other pressing indications that are more related to convenience, family situations, and so on and so forth, and it's before the 40 days, then mutual agreement is required.
I see. So, Doctor, for example, we have the child at birth, and the child's there, all formed, alhamdulillah, and they're fine. If the parents are incapable of, looking after the child, whose responsibility will it then become to look after that child if the parents are incapable of looking after the baby?
Well, if the parents are incapable of looking after the baby, it is the responsibility of the whole society. But then there is a certain order. And we may actually talk about custody in a completely separate episode, because it's such an important and big issue. But briefly, if the two parents are incapable of looking after the child after birth, then it moves on. And now in terms of maintenance, in terms of spending, it is the responsibility of the father.
Yes.
And if he was not able to afford it, then it moves on to someone else. It moves on to his father, and so on. But the custody, which in the sense of physical, taking care of the child physically, bathing the child, and
Yes.
rearing the child. All of this is the right of the mother. Is it obligatory on the mother? According to the majority of the scholars, it's not obligatory on the mother, unless there is no one else who would do the same job. But it is the responsibility of the father to maintain the child, including finding someone to take care of that child. And that is in the case where if they are divorced, but if they are living together,
Yes.
Then the mother should take care of the baby, unless they can afford to have, a caretaker, like a nanny or something of that nature,
Yes.
to take care of the baby. If they're both incapable of taking care of the baby physically, then we will follow a certain order. The baby will be taken care of by the maternal grandmothers, as far as up as it goes. So the maternal grandmother, the great maternal grandmother, and so on.
Okay, I see.
And then next in line would be the the paternal grandmothers.
Okay.
Because women are given preference over men in terms of physical custody. After the paternal grandmothers, it moves on to the maternal aunt.
Yes.
And after the maternal aunt, it moves on to the sister of the child, if the child has like a grown-up sister.
I see.
And then it moves on to the father. And then the madhahib, even what I said it's also not a matter of consensus. The only matter of consensus here is that the mother is most entitled.
Yes.
And then the mother is most entitled, that's for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for your thoughts today. I really appreciate your supporting us in the studio today.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, the viewers at home. Until next time, I'll leave you in the safe care of Allah. Assalamu alaikum.
Which of Allah's favors can we deny? Above all creatures, He chose us to be high. To Him we belong, to Him is our return. Life in this world is only a sojourn. To the angels He commanded that man be respected. Shaitan he did not, and so was he rejected. Compared to the angels, we are but clay. As long as Allah we obey, we'll not go astray.